Hello and welcome to our webinar titled Use PWK for Faster Claim Processing. My name is Mary Muko and I am a member of the WPS Provider Outreach and Education team, and I will be your host today. Assisting me with co-hosting duties is my friend and coworker, Shakura Harris. Shakura will be monitoring the chat and placing some additional resources and details there throughout today's webinar. Because today's topic relates to electronic claim submissions, I'm really excited to announce that WPS's Andy Norgord has accepted my invitation to join me for today's webinar. Andy, would you care to provide a brief self-introduction so that those that have joined can get to know a little bit about you and your role at WPS?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name's Andy Norgord. I manage the EDI team for WPS. This is my ninth year doing that. I actually got my start at WPS, though, working in the Medicare division, so I'm really familiar with Medicare, and I'm excited to be helping out.
And we're so pleased to have you. Thanks, Andy. So, why did I choose to provide this topic for education? It's because my experience has proven that most providers are not aware of the PWK process that can really speed up adjudication of claims. It allows you to bypass the time to get the additional documentation letter to your office. And this could ultimately result in receiving payment more quickly. So our objective today is for you to understand how you can use the PW claim segment that can lead to faster claim adjudication and faster payment. I will explain the process and the documentation submission time frames. I'm going to show you how to find the electronic claim requirements and the cover sheet to send when using this process. And finally, I'll share some tips to expedite receipt of documentation. So let's get started with the PWK definition and process. So what is PWK? PWK stands for the paperwork segment within the 837 professional or institutional electronic claim. Correct use of this process allows you to link an electronic claim with supporting documentation so it can be processed immediately. Use of the PWK segment is voluntary. You don't have to use this process. It allows the provider to submit medical records with their claim, which prevents the Medicare Administrative Contractor, or the MAC, from having to issue a formal additional documentation request, or ADR letter. If Medicare needs records to process the claim is going to suspend, and it looks for that PWK segment. If Medicare needs no records, the claim continues to process. This slide summarizes how PWK works. When filing the 837 professional or institutional claim, the provider completes the PWK segment on the claim. By following an identified process with required steps, the claim notifies the MAC that attachments are coming and how they are coming. It's important to follow all of those required steps in order to submit that needed documentation by the deadlines for doing so. Let's take a look at some of the benefits of PWK use. This process can lead to faster adjudication of claims. I mentioned that earlier. There's no need for you to wait for and then respond to the MAC's request for documentation or that ADR letter. Medicare still needs to abide by the payment floor, though, something to keep in mind. PWK can help reduce the burden for the provider staff because the provider staff is in the know. They already know about this process. They know about when certain records are needed for review because that's identified. The needed records are already in the Medicare reviewer's hands before there's a need to auto-deny for lack of information. This process can save money in so many different ways, and streamlining processes within an organization and quicker claim payments can really help accomplish this. Now, use of the PWK process to submit needed documentation can help eliminate the need for those second requests for documentation or even appeals. Again, a way to save money. both for the provider and for Medicare. We do have a resource on our website that explains the PWK process. This resource includes the steps to allow correct processing of a Medicare claim. And remember that I mentioned you have to follow those steps exactly as they are written. Important in this process. So I'm going to go ahead and open up that particular resource, getting it ready here to show you. Okay, it's out on the web. That's what it looks like. And it is within this particular resource on our website. I'm going to make it a little bit bigger for you so you can see it a little bit better. That the resource explains what is PWK. And here are those electronic claim requirements. Remember, you need to follow this process that's included here in this resource exactly as it is in order for this process to work. There's information here about a cover sheet. I'll be talking more about that in just a little bit. You need to send that when you're returning your records to Medicare or sending your claims to Medicare. The article or resource talks a little bit about those documentation frames, and I will talk about that a little bit more in a bit. And we're talking here a little bit more about the fact that when there is an ADR letter already sent to a provider, there can be no PWK process. This process is one that occurs before an ADR letter is sent, but once an ADR letter is sent, you cannot use the paperwork process. All right, so here are those steps. You're going to submit that claim with the correct PWK indicator. Make certain you complete that cover sheet, include one cover sheet per claim, and make certain that you're completing all of those required blanks that are on that form. Once you pull the records together, you're going to submit that cover sheet with the records. There's different ways you can submit. I'll talk about that a little bit more. It could be by fax, by email, or by mail, by ESMD. Again, I will expand on that in just a little bit. Submit the documentation consistent with that method that you've indicated in the PWK segment of the claim, and submit that documentation immediately following your claim submission. So here is a direct link to that particular resource that I just opened and showed you. It includes all of the information that I just mentioned while I had the document open. You know, what is PWK? There's a link to that cover sheet. There's information about documentation submission timeframes and more. All right. I want to talk a little bit more about those ways you can find those electronic claim requirements consistent with the information on our website. So this slide then describes the data elements that identify to the MAC that a paper attachment is forthcoming. You need to complete the data elements as shown here, and there is a continuation of these on the next slide. So this identifies the loop where you need to put information and those data elements to identify that that paper claim, or that paper attachment rather, is coming into WPS. So I'm going to let you read through those on your own. Here are more PWK data elements. This is really just a continuation of the required data elements that I started talking about on the previous slide. And I want to make certain that you do understand the importance of completing all of the required data elements correctly in order for this process to work, in order for it to be successful. All of the data elements that appear on the slides were taken directly from that website resource I just showed you. And if during the claim submission process you have questions about the completion of the required data elements, you can contact customer service and someone will be happy to help you. Let's talk a bit more about the documentation and the timeframes for submitting the documentation next in the near final portion of my prepared remarks. This slide includes those common situations when MACs like WPS, and again, MAC is a Medicare Administrative Contractor, when they need documentation to support correct adjudication of a claim. These appear on the website resource that I showed you earlier. And for your convenience, I have embedded a link to that resource here in the footer of this particular slide. You can see common situations when we need medical record documentation to make a payment decision would be the submission of an NOC code or a not otherwise classified code. When multiple units of service are billed on the same day for the same patient. There's some examples there on the left side of this slide, NPI information mismatch, modifiers, and so on and so forth. One of the modifiers is the 22 modifier, and I did receive a question about when documentation or what documentation needs to be included for a modifier 22, and I want to show you how you can link to some great information that will be helpful and answer that for you. I'm going to link to the resource that I've included in the footer of the claim by clicking on it here. It's opening the document. It's opened on the other my other monitor. I'm going to choose my Medicare WPS jurisdiction, which I could choose any, but I'm going to go with the lower right quadrant here, J8 MAC Part B. I'm going to accept the American Medical Association's licensure agreement to bring myself back to that document or resource that I linked to. So here are those situations, some of which I just talked about, where more documentation is needed. And this is what you need to share with the staff within your organization so that they'll easily be able to recognize this is when WPS is going to need documentation. They can be at the ready to use this process and really reduce that burden of determining what is needed, what isn't needed. And here is listed as one of these examples of when documentation is needed, the modifier 22, which was a pre-submitted question. How do I know what I need to submit when I use a modifier 22, which identifies unusual services? It does require an operative report, and there also needs to be, just as written here on this resource, a separate concise statement about how that service differs from the usual. Okay, that modifier is identifies unusual services. Well, why is it unusual? Why for that CPT code reported were the services different or unusual? There's also a link here to our modifier 22 fact sheet, which provides not only the definition of a modifier 22 or use of the modifier 22, but also appropriate uses, inappropriate uses, and there's a little bit of information about documentation. And this is what the learner was asking for. What do I need to submit when we report modifier 22? Again, the operative report, that separate statement that indicates how that service was different. If we don't receive documentation, the claim is going to be processed based on normal Medicare guidelines, and a little bit more information there for you about the use of the 22 modifier. So a very good resource for you for those questions that pertain to use of the modifier 22 fact sheet, available on the WPS website. Back to the PowerPoint. Moving along here. You can find a link to the documentation cover sheet that you'll need to utilize in the PWK process by using the embedded link in our website resource. Another way to quickly find this is to navigate to all forms. I will be demonstrating this for you just right now, this time. Going to the WPS website, and right now I'm on the home page. But on any page of the WPS website, you'll notice some items at the top. In this menu, we have our topic center, training center, how to contact. If you select tools, choose all tools. Here's our all tools webpage. This is self-service tools and other tools, a lot of great stuff here. Stuff is one of my favorite words. A lot of great information or resources available here. But if you choose all forms here on the left, you'll be able to look at all forms. You can search by specialty or service, A to Z or topic. It really doesn't matter how you get there. It's really up to your personal preference. I like to look at all of the guides and resources on our website based on the topic. So I've left topic open here. After going to all forms, choose documentation. And then when the items appear, you will select the link to the cover sheet. So fax, mail, ESMD cover sheet. Okay, so that is how you navigate to this cover sheet that you'll need to return along with your documentation. You'll choose the link, click on the download. And once downloaded, remember that you need to complete all of the items on the cover sheet, including the ACN. And ACN stands for Attachment Control Number. And this is the number that was entered in the PWK loop on your claim. It was part of that identified process, the information you need to enter on the claim when using the PWK process. One thing to remember when you are using this PWK process is the timeliness factors. Here on the slide is some information about timely submission of documentation. Never submit that documentation before you submit a claim. WPS will allow 7 days from the claim receipt date if you're sending your records via fax or you're sending them electronically. If you're mailing those records, we do allow or wait 10 days to receive them. Remember, you're going to enter information on the claim that says, hey, WPS, I'm using the PWK process. I'm going to send you an attachment, and this is how you're going to get it. Okay, once your claim is accepted at WPS, you send that documentation immediately. There's no need to wait for that ADR letter. If you get an ADR letter, it's not the PWK process, okay? So we're gonna wait 7 days for your information to come in. And then based on that information on your claim and the information on that cover sheet, we are going to match that up, and we're going to have your documentation without waiting for it or waiting for that ADR process. It's going to come in more quickly and send that claim on along the way. So to make certain we correctly process your claim, you need to be sure to follow all of those required steps that are listed in that website resource. You can submit claims via fax, mail, or ESMD. And if you're not familiar with SMED or ESMD, that stands for Electronic Submission of Medical Documentation. And that is a voluntary system created by the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services that allows healthcare providers to securely and electronically send those requested medical records and prior authorization documents to Medicare review contractors. Now, I've asked Shakura to place a link to the CMS SMED or ESMD webpage in the chat. Now, if we don't receive the records by the deadline, claim processing will proceed, relying only on the coded information provided on your claim. So we will not consider documentation received beyond that waiting day time limit. Remember, that is 7 days from claim receipt if you're sending records via fax or electronically, not email, and we'll wait 10 days for mailed documentation. So to close out my prepared remarks, here are some tips to help with the correct use of the PWK claim segment. Make certain you send the correct cover sheet for your jurisdiction. If you submit claims in Jurisdiction 8, Part B, make certain you're using our Jurisdiction 8, Part B form. And remember, to get to that cover sheet, you're going to go out to all forms on our website, and we're going to I'm going to you it again here, pulling open over on my other monitor. So again, many important of sending the correct sheet. Make sure you are submitting the cover sheet for your jurisdiction. Well, how do you right? And then we have our secure portal. Right at the top of any web page, you're going to find this ribbon that allows you to choose and open one of our websites. Okay, so if you submit claims, jurisdiction 8 MAC Part B, you want to make certain you're on the J8 MAC Part B website. Similarly, if you're Part A, let's say J5 MAC Part A, you would make certain that you click here so that the cover sheet you receive is correct. Okay, so just a tip there for you. Make sure that all of the fields are completed on that cover sheet. We do not allow any modifications whatsoever. Okay, so all of the forms need to be completed and no modifications to that form. Be cognizant of all deadlines so that your records are going to arrive timely at WPS. Make certain everyone within your office or organization is in those that are involved in it, ready to get that documentation to us utilizing this process. If you've completed the PWK segments on the claim that are you need to complete for this process, then make certain they're at the ready to get that documentation in timely. Some more tips here on this particular slide. Work with your vendor to verify that your clearinghouse or billing software properly maps the PWK segment to the correct loop in the 837 format. And verify that attachment control number or ACN on the claim correctly matches the one on that fax cover sheet or your digital upload portal. Finally, one last tip or item that is so very, very important to know. If you receive an additional documentation request or an ADR letter from WPS, do not respond using any steps of the PWK process. The PWK process is not being used when you receive an ADR letter. It's too late. So you can't kind of come into the process partway and begin it. It's only when the claim is submitted and everything is completed as required, you're telling WPS, hey, I have documentation. This is how I'm going to send it. I'm using this PWK process. If you were to receive an ADR letter and then you jump in and try to use the PWK process, it actually delays processing of the claim. So make certain that you are aware of, number one, if you used that process, or number two, you've got a letter, the PWK does not apply. Next, I want to provide just a little bit of information about Medicare EDI, and I'm certain that Andy can tell you all about EDI, but we do have a website that includes a Medicare EDI webpage that has links to multiple helpful items such as those that I've shown here. It really is your one-stop shop for all things EDI. And when I do webinars or facilitate webinars and I talk about claim rejections and claim denials based on that data that we've pulled, and we present to our WPS MAC learners, I talk often about some of the great resources that are available out on the EDI webpage. And I've linked to it here. This is a direct link, but another way to find this great information is when you're on the WPS website, because it's so very important and helpful for Medicare providers. On the homepage over here under quick links is EDI. So I'm going to navigate to it as opposed to, I think I'm going to navigate to it. I've kind of caught, there we go. My cursor is active again. I go to the EDI webpage. We have and our PWS health plan to make certain you're getting your Medicare information, Medicare claim here. And I'm going to make this larger. Hang on with me just a moment. Make it a little bit larger. This is that Medicare EDI page. Here is where you can link to some great information, getting started, enrollment, companion guides. But one of my faves, and I show this often when I'm talking about rejections and denials, is the CMS 1500 to the 837 5010 crosswalk. This is a great resource for Medicare providers when submitting claims. This provides the narrative, the item number on the paper claim, the data element descriptions, requirements for the version 5010. And one thing that's really important here as you move through those, for example, if it's in item 5 on the paper claim form, where does it go on the 837 version 5010? One thing that I find is particularly helpful to point out to learners or people that attend my webinars is this status code column right here, and I can't highlight just the status code column. See the R here and the S and the R and the S? The bottom of each page of this crosswalk, it explains to you that R is a required data element. It is needed in order to process a claim. If something with an R is not on a Medicare claim, your claim is going to reject. Something that's required is omitted or missing, not there, or maybe it's even there, but it's not clear, or it's illogical, then that claim will reject. So just a few more tips for you to make claim submission more helpful. Okay, and crosswalking from paper to the electronic version. Other Medicare resources appear there on that web page as well. I'm going to go back to it just for a minute here. The companion guides, very, very helpful information. I always like to show this for folks that submit their claims electronically, which is nearly everyone. All right, I believe I covered the pre-submitted question about the modifier 22. I'm just going to give a look, real quick look here to see if there's something else that I want to mention to you in terms of the pre-submitted questions. Hang on just a minute. I should have popped it open. I apologize I didn't do that before the webinar, but I'm quickly navigating to it. And here it is, my information. Again, and I have to give thanks to Andy because he is the one that knows all things electronic claim, unlike me. My world is PO. So PO is Provider Outreach and Education. So one of the questions that we got, and we get these pre-submitted questions during the registration process, was what is being done, or what if this is being done and you're still not seeing increased payment? And I want to mention that the use of that PWK segment does not equate to an increased payment. It is through that dedicated PWK process that we're going to image and connect that documentation that's available during claim adjudication, and it really leads to faster claim processing. It allows you to bypass the time to get the additional documentation request to your office. It reduces your burden when the person submitting the claim knows what information it is that's needed for Medicare to adjudicate the claim. So the person in the office can submit documentation at or near the same time as the claim. So it's not necessarily that it's going to increase your payment, but if payment is allowed, it may get that claim or that payment to you more quickly. And saving you time and money because of this process. Can we use this to submit records that support NOC codes that Medicare returns claims in DDE for? And DDE is the direct data entry, and that's for Part A claims. Would that allow the claim to be processed with the NOC code on it? The answer is that the PWK process, which links that electronic claim to unsolicited supporting documentation via fax, mail, or SMED, is exclusive to the HIPAA-compliant Batch 837 electronic claims submitted through an EDI clearinghouse. And DDE claims are keyed manually as distinct online transactions, and they do not have PWK segment capabilities. And I reached out to Andy with this question because it's really in his area of expertise. He added to my answer when I asked him to review the question and response that the answer is correct, but we need to clarify the exact scenario. And in this case, It's not clear if the learner is asking if they can use the PWK during a DDE submission, which they can't, or if the learner is asking if the PWK on an EDI claim would prevent the claim from being returned and needing correction through DDE. Excuse me. All right. Um, sorry about that. I needed a drink of water. Right now, I'm going to ask Shakura if there are any questions.
Hey, Mary. Yeah, we have one question. How many days after a claim is sent electronically should we fax the PWK form? Would the next day be too soon or just within the next 7 days?
Andy, do you want to address how a provider would know when it's time that they can submit that documentation?
Yeah, I mean, I can speak to how quickly the EDI claim will get into the system. If it's received by WPS before, I believe it's 5 p.m., it'll be in the system that same day. If it's received after 5 p.m., it'll be in the following business day, and that just has to do with the way the claim systems cycle those claims in. Um, so yeah, I would think the next day should be fine, provided, or maybe I should caveat that with the next business day should be fine. Um, there's really no need for you to wait too much longer. If you send it before the claims in the system, um, I have to admit, I'm not sure what would happen with that attachment. If they get an attachment and they don't have a claim for it, I'm not sure what would happen there.
Thanks so much. That gave me an opportunity to get a little drink of water here. One other question that we did have before I go back to you, Shakura, I'm finding here as I'm looking over those pre-submitted questions. And for those of you that might not remember, when you registered for this webinar, we gave you an opportunity to answer, what is that one question you have that you'd like to learn or receive the answer to in this webinar? That's where these questions are coming from that I'm sharing with you now. As I look back at that the registration report, one of the questions was, is there a more efficient way for billing T codes when we send the PWK form with records when sending the claim electronically? The learner goes on to say claims continue to reject or we get second requests for records. How can we use this form to get the claims in the system and not reject? And I really don't have enough information to answer this question. I would be asking you, how are you submitting the claim? Is it a Part A claim or a Part B claim? The PWK process, when used correctly, does not involve an additional documentation request letter or a second request, as your question kind of mentions, but when used correctly, that PWK process is going to replace the need for Medicare to send an ADR letter. So if you share more information in a reply to this email, I'll be happy to help you. Back to you, Shakura. Are there any additional questions received?
No, ma'am. That was the only one.
All right, great. And thanks, Andy, for jumping in there. It helped me greatly. And you can say it much better than me when you're answering those EDI specific questions. And I'm just so pleased that you joined us today. Going back to the webinar, or the webinar PowerPoint rather, I do have a couple of things that I do want to share before we close. First, I want to talk about overpayments. We receive many overpayment notifications and refund requests from providers. We know that you want to repay Medicare in a timely manner. However, there can be delays if you use an incorrect or outdated form. Now, missing information or sending checks without explanations are just some other reasons that can cause a delay in processing your overpayment. And I'm talking about those unsolicited overpayments, those that a provider discovers and says, hey, Medicare, please ask me for this money back. It was an overpayment. You shouldn't have paid us. Or, hey, we found this overpayment. We're going to send you the money back. So to avoid unnecessary holdups, consider using the SecureNet Access portal refunds or overpayment claim adjustment features. If you choose to send paper requests and checks, please make sure that you select the correct contract based on your provider number and the correct Medicare type. Choose Part A if the claim was processed through FIS, the Fiscal Intermediary Shared System, and Part B if the claim was processed through CS, the multi-carrier system. So just some helpful tips here to help process those overpayments more timely. Some information about redetermination decision changes, and this is specific to Part A, not to Part B, but prior to June 1 of 2026, appeal correspondence on appeals submitted via the SNAP, our SecureNet Access portal, was sent via paper mail, and as of June 1 of this year, paper delivery will no longer be used for appeals that are submitted through our portal. And this update applies to all active WPS SNAP accounts using that NPI and PTAN combination, and it will be implemented automatically. So effective that day, all providers with an active SNAP account who do submit their appeal request through the portal will no longer receive decision letters through the U.S. mail. All appeal letters, including those that are unfavorable, partially favorable, those dismissals or reopening corrections, can now be viewed and downloaded directly from the portal. Portals will receive email notifications regarding a decision on their email, or their appeal rather, and they will be given immediate access to their appeal correspondence. For those of you that are unfamiliar with some of the functions of the SecureNet Access portal, if you're out on the WPS website, and again, I'm going to make this a little bit larger, we do have a link here. This one just happens to be on this guide and resource, doesn't matter. If you click on the icon, or not the icon, icon, if you will, up here, WPS, you're going to quickly go back or transport back to our homepage. Doing so, hover over and click on this, branding, if you will. You'll always return to the homepage of our website. But if you go here, you will be able to link back to the homepage. We're talking about those redetermination decisions, and I was talking about both the portal user manual. There's a link to it right here on our homepage. Sorry, I scrolled too quickly. Up here, and it's available at every single web page here under Educational Opportunities in the large blue box. Link to the portal user manual. That portal user manual has it has illustrations and step-by-step instructions for all of the functionalities of our portal. So that will help you if you are submitting redeterminations via the portal and now getting those notifications via the portal rather, not portable. All right. That brings us here. When you disconnect from the webinar today, you are going to be redirected to a CMS survey. I'm also asking Shakur to add a link in the chat. I really hope that you'll take a moment to provide feedback on how I did today. That redirect looks like what may be malicious or suspicious, but it's really not. We don't have any control over what that looks like. We want you to know it's not spam or anything malicious. It's just simply a pop-up that will take you all away from WebEx and out to the CMS Qualtrics survey for today's webinar. The feedback we receive really does lead to change. We added chapters to our Encore presentations and YouTube videos, and only those YouTube videos, I should say. And these are actually timestamps that can be found in the description of our video, and they not only give you an overview of what's being covered, but they also help you jump to points in the video that interest you the most. So for example, if you want to come back to something I talked about early in today's presentation, when you're looking at our video, you'll be able to look at that list. It's kind of like a table of contents. WebEx calls them chapters. You can go right to that topic, click on it, and it will take you there in the video, as opposed to having to kind of scroll along and find that portion of the webinar. So just a little bit about the survey and how very, very important. After disconnecting today, you're going to receive a thank you email from me. It is going to contain a certificate of achievement. You can submit that for continuing education units. You may also receive it from WebEx. And I say you may also receive it from WebEx. That is that automated email that might come to you because they send a thank you out and they include that language in the body of the email. It's not a separate attachment that serves as your certificate of achievement. I'm saying you may receive it because we're just kind of in the middle of some changes at WPS where, you know, after August 1, most of the webinars that we're offering, or all of them eventually, will be that we, the individual specialist at WPS in the Provider Outreach and Education Unit, are going to send you not just your certificate of achievement for attending, but also the presentation materials. We'll no longer be sending those out in advance. And the reasons for this change just went out in a mass communication to everyone on our e-news listserv. So some changes coming about. Now, if you think of any questions, those can be emailed for up to 7 days following today's event. Shakura has placed information in the chat about where to send those questions. And for 7 days, I can take questions that are presentation related. If needed, I'll knock on Andy's door and ask him to help me with some of the specific EDI questions. And we'll get those out either directly to the learner who submitted the question, or we'll make a list of questions and answers and share them with everyone. And that brings us then to the end of today's presentation. On behalf of myself, Shakura and Andy and all of the Provider Outreach and Education and EDI teams, I want to thank you for being here, and I hope that you will join us for future events. You may now disconnect. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.